Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So, David Benavidez beats down, beats up, and stops Anthony Yarde in 7 rounds. In what was a pretty one-sided fight, it has to be clear. Me personally, I felt Benavidez looked very good in this fight, looked very switched on, fought a smart fight. Defensively, I felt he covered himself up quite well throughout this bout, because to me it was very clear that Anthony Yarde's game plan, I guess you could call it, revolved in basically just landing one big punch, and it looked like that, to me it looked like Yarde anyway was trying to essentially catch and counter Benavidez, like I say, with one big shot, maybe the uppercut, maybe the overhand right, and Yarde would back up, he would try and cover up, he would try and roll with shots. Primarily, he would, a lot of the time anyway, he would go up against, with his back to the ropes, and try and lean back and try and counter. And early on, Yarde, I felt, did a relatively okay job. Like, his game plan made sense to a degree. He was losing all the rounds, don't get me wrong, but there were times when he would get through with a single shot, an uppercut, a right hand, like I said, a couple of body shots here and there. But what I liked early on in this fight, I felt Benavidez showed great poise. He didn't get overexcited early on. He wasn't sitting in the pocket too long with Yarde. He was picking his moments really effectively and really astutely. He wasn't doing these crazy 10-punch combinations right at the start of this fight. Instead, he was relying more on 2, 3, 4-punch combinations as Yarde would back up, or as Yarde was against the ropes. Then he would reset and start again, not sitting in the pocket too long when Anthony Yarde was fresh, or not sitting in front of Yarde for too long when Yarde was fresh. I also felt Benavidez's guard in this fight was very good. He's very reactive with that guard. He's got... I'm going to come out and say it might be controversial. I think Benavidez is developing a high guard, that is becoming one of the best in boxing. Because he can counter off the guard. He's got an active guard. He can parry. Not only that, but Benavidez has a long torso, and he does a great job at protecting both his body and his head with his guard. I think it's really, really good, and it's come on a long way in recent years, and it goes to show, for me at least, a high guard is always seen as like the most basic defense in boxing, but mastering a high guard, or getting really good at a high guard, is actually a difficult skill. It's not a skill that we see much of in boxing these days. And yeah, I felt that Benavidez did a really good job at defending what was coming back from Yarde. There were a few times when he would get overzealous, and Yarde would land a quick counter down the middle, things of that nature. But Benavidez ate the shots, and they never had an effect on him really, from what I saw anyway. But yeah, the first sort of 3, 4, 5 rounds, I felt that Benavidez was winning the rounds. Yarde was staying in the rounds but not winning them, landing the odd shot here and there. But for me, the first sort of 5 rounds were not completely dominated, but totally controlled by Benavidez, and I would describe his performance in those first sort of 5 rounds as very professional, very mature. Wasn't feeling himself too much, but at the same time, he was still active, he was still aggressive, he was still forcing the fight, he was still on the front foot, he was still dictating the pace, but he just wasn't giving Yarde as many opportunities as I think Yarde would have imagined he would have. Because Benavidez has that reputation of being a bit overzealous at times. Sometimes he does get a bit greedy. He has gotten a bit greedy in certain fights, sometimes maybe guilty of admiring his success a bit too much. But in this fight, was constantly covering himself up, was constantly getting out of range when he felt he was overstaying his welcome. And I liked that from Benavidez. After round 5, and by the way, I haven't made note of this, but early on in this fight, I noticed, and the commentary didn't make a note of it, which I was surprised with. I think it was as early as the second round. You could see Anthony Yarde's eye was already starting to look a bit funny, like, not bruised, but kind of, like the orbital injury, when the eye has that kind of weird alien look to it. Anthony Yarde's eye early on was starting to look like that, like a minor version of that, but you could tell that the punches were already having an effect on Yarde, and as the fight would play out, they would drain more and more from Yarde, and they would pile up, and that's exactly what happened. As we got to round 6, that's when Benavidez really started to go through the gears on Yarde. And yeah, Yarde's face by round 6 was already starting to break down. The swelling around his eyes got even worse. His nose got bloodied as well. Quite a lot of blood coming from that nose. And round 6, Benavidez just set about Yarde, doing what he does best, those multi-punch combinations with level changes from body to head, from head to body, uppercuts and hooks, straight punches, jabs mixed in there as well. Towards the end of round 6, Yarde was just sitting in the corner, taking an absolute shellacking, and the shots in which he did try to throw back, there wasn't much mustard on these punches. So even by this point in round 6, you felt that Yarde's hourglass was completely empty, and he couldn't turn the tide. Yeah, round 6, Yarde took a beating from Benavidez, and round 7 was more of the same. Benavidez backed up Yarde at the start of round 7, and again got him in a corner. Multi-punch combination that dropped Yarde. However, despite Benavidez getting the knockdown, Yarde was punched when he was down, and as a result, Benavidez got a point deduction. In fact, I think the referee may have even taken 2 points from Benavidez for that foul. The commentary said it was only 1 point, but the referee held up 2 fingers, so I'm assuming it was 2 points. Anyway, Yarde finds the canvas. He does get up, face is bloodied, face is battered, tries to fight on. Benavidez jumps on him. He realises at this point Yarde has nothing left. Again, pushes Yarde back. Yarde's back is stationary against the ropes. Benavidez opens up. He lands a left hook, bang on the chin, which rocks Yarde. And at this point, the ref had seen enough, and he stops Yarde on his feet. Good stoppage by the ref. Yarde had nothing left. No issues there from me. Good performance by Benavidez, has to be said. First 5 rounds, like I said, he was winning the fight. He was winning the rounds. He was outboxing, outworking Yarde. And once he realised Yarde had nothing left, he jumped on it right away, and that's what I appreciate. He jumped on it right away, wasn't fucking about, wasn't hanging around, and he took Yarde out. So overall, I think this was a very good display by Benavidez, not just in terms of offense and getting the stoppage, but also just in regards to every aspect. I felt he showed patience, I felt he showed poise, good defense, and Benavidez isn't just a slugger. He's not just a guy who outworks you. He's got a lot of subtle skill in there, in my opinion. And you combine that with the output, the activity, the speed. He's a dangerous out. He really is. After this fight, though, Benavidez announced that in May, he's going to be fighting not at light heavyweight, but at cruiserweight against Gilberto Ramirez. Now, I have mixed feelings on this. I would love to see Benavidez in there with Bivol or Beterbiev. I think they would be great fights, and there's some people out there who believe those guys are too good for Benavidez. I think they're very competitive, personally. I think Benavidez is very good. And I would love to see those fights, man. I really, really would. So I'm partly disappointed that, Benavidez is going to cruiserweight. I'm partly disappointed. But Gilberto Ramirez, as you guys know, I've rated Ramirez for quite some time. I think he's a very good fighter in its own right. And, people will say, well, at least Benavidez is fighting guys around his size. And Ramirez, much like Benavidez, was a massive super middleweight. He was a massive light heavyweight. So, that's a good fight in and of itself. Ramirez versus Benavidez is a good fight. And it's an interesting fight for me because, again, I think Ramirez has been very underrated for quite some time. And can Benavidez carry that output up to cruiserweight? I think he can. He's not a muscle-bound guy or anything like that. I think he can carry that kind of output and speed up to cruiserweight. I really do. It's whether he can compete with other big cruiserweights as well, though. Like, whether he can take the punches, etc., because there's bigger guys at cruiserweight than Benavidez. A guy like Jai Opetaia, for example. But, Benavidez versus Ramirez, it interests me. It does. So, I'm partly disappointed that Benavidez isn't sticking around at light heavyweight. Is there a reason for that? There was rumours going into this fight that Benavidez was really struggling to make weight. Is it going to be a one-off? I don't know, but again, I do like the Ramirez fight, so I'm not going to sit here and say, Benavidez ducked Beterbiev or ducked Bivol when he's fighting Ramirez. That's how I see it anyway. As for Yarde, listen, that was Yarde's third world title fight, and quite frankly, at this stage of his career, probably should retire. You know, he's made some good money out of boxing. He's fought for a world title 3 times, came up short, but this time around, it was a beating. And quite frankly, he's probably never been the same since the fight with Beterbiev, because even after that fight, his performances against Vilkans and Lyndon Arthur in their third fight, they weren't great performances by Yarde, it has to be said. And yeah, I think Yarde is long in the tooth these days, personally. I think he's long in the tooth. This was the final roll of the dice. Is there much point sticking around now? In my opinion, no. Maybe there's a domestic fight against Buatsi, but even that's lost its luster from a couple of years ago. So, listen, if I was advising Yarde, I would say it's time to call it a day. Personally, I would say it's time to call it a day. He took a lot of punishment in there against Benavidez, as he did against Beterbiev and Kovalev. So, probably time to call it a day for Anthony Yarde, I would say. But Benavidez moves on. Good performance. I enjoyed the performance. And yeah, looks like Ramirez next. So share your thoughts below. Beanie Guy Delboy. Peace.